Call to order the City of Haslet's Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Today's date is Tuesday, February 27th, 2024, and the time is 7:24 p.m. And we do have a quorum present this evening. So I'm going to begin with some items of community interest. On Saturday, May 4th, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., the Haslet general election will take place, and this will be for electing City Council Member Place 1, Council Member Place 3, and Council Member Place 5. And all of those positions are for a 2-year term. And then there's a City of Haslet special election that's also going to be held on Saturday, May 4th, and that is for the citizens who desire to reauthorize the local sales tax and use tax to vote on behalf of that or against it if you desire. That is used for the maintenance and repair of municipal streets in the City of Haslet. The tax is 0.25% or 0.25% of sales tax and use tax. And the early voting period for the May 4th election begins on Monday, April 22nd, and ends on Tuesday, April 30th. And polling in place information is going to be published by this, according to state law. And the annual Easter egg hunt is going to be on March 23rd at 4 p.m. in the Haslet Community Park. Lots of kids running around on that day. And then Haslet is still hiring for some incredible positions. If you have skills in these areas, there's a public works supervisor, a parks and grounds maintenance worker, a parks and grounds crew leader, a couple of different water worker maintenance positions, a 1 and a 2, and all the information about those opportunities can be found on the City Haslet website. And moving on to our consent agenda, we have our meeting minutes from January 2024, regular meeting that need to be approved. Any discussion on the meeting minutes? If not, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as written.
Motion accept as written. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes with 1 abstention. Okay, moving on to agenda item 5A. Discuss, consider, and act regarding the approval of the Caraway Commercial Preliminary Plat. So we're going to begin with our staff presentation.
And Chairman and members of the board, this is a plat on 24 acres, and it includes 12 commercial tracts. And these commercial tracts are in line with the planned development for the Caraway addition. If you can look at the location map, the area that's highlighted in light green is the area of the preliminary plat, but there was an area just to the west of that which was a part of the mixed-use commercial district. And this is the remaining part of that. And, prior to, coming forth with development, you have to do a preliminary plat to make sure all the drainage works, there's plenty of water and sewer. So they did sort of a complementary site plan with it that shows the landscape setbacks, the easements, the drainage, and everything else that is needed for that. And could you go ahead and go through? Go one more, a couple more pages right there. That's a copy of the preliminary plat. They're showing 2 entrance. That's what we're anticipating at this time, and that'll be probably the lot in the southeast corner of this tract. But they can't do that until the use is added to the planned development, which you'll probably see at your next meeting. Having said that, that concludes the staff report.
Hey, thank you. Was there any comment cards? One comment card? Okay. We're not actually going to be having a public hearing on this because it's not required, but I will give water off. Did I say that even close to right? Please correct me.
Laura Schlotteroff? Yeah.
If you would state your address as well, please, ma'am.
Sure. It's 1195 Wild Senna Way, and I live in Caraway. So you will allow the public comment?
Yes, I'll allow you to speak. Again, we don't have a formal public hearing for this, so, but since you filled out a comment card, I'll let you speak.
Thank you. Hello, Planning and Zoning Commission. My comments and questions may be clarified once we see the presentation. I just needed to make sure that my voice was heard since I'm a nearby resident in Caraway, nearby resident of Caraway Commercial. I'm glad we're finally getting some commercial businesses on the east side of Haslet. We have wanted some restaurants closer than Alliance for a while now. However, I want to present some questions and caution. I'm concerned there may be too much going into lots 1 through 12. Is there truly adequate parking for the types of businesses suggested? Are we getting some green space with trees and shrubs to make the shopping area attractive? Do we get any say on what types of businesses go in? To clarify, is it necessary to have 2 banks right next to each other? Do we want a 7-Eleven to go in right across the street from the QT that is already approved? I don't think it necessary since there is a Flying J across the 35 overpass. Also, there's a brand new 7-Eleven going in 2.3 miles at Timberland just east of 35. Should any infrastructure improvements be made to Pass Drive if the parking lots are accessed by Pass Drive? The letter from Belchef and Associates Incorporated included in the agenda mentions the application was reviewed for compliance with the requirements of the city's subdivision ordinance. I am confused. The property we are discussing is commercial. Should this be clarified, or could this be clarified? What does this developer need to follow? Then perhaps I will understand the setbacks that were used on the Johnson-Volk consulting plans. The buildings bordering Pass Drive have different setback lengths. The larger retail store doesn't have a setback labeled, and the smaller retail buildings say 30 feet. If I have looked up the correct document, the zoning ordinance article 3.3.5, General Commercial District, Part D, states that the setbacks for commercial adjacent to single-family residential zoned lot, side or rear, is minimum 50 feet. I look forward to discussion on this topic as this development will be right outside my street. I thank you in advance for your time and commitment to considering these items.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, move to discussion. Any questions for the city staff? I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to pose it as a question, but I already know the answer. Then I'm going to give you an opportunity to. I'm sorry? So the land that was in discussion right now is subject to the ordinances under the planned development that was approved 3+ years ago, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And those standards require certain construction aspects, screening aspects, use. There's a limited number of uses permitted. Any other major call-outs that we would say that that ordinance, that plan development ordinance, controls as this gets developed?
Those are the two basic things that it controls. It controls what uses can be put there, and also it identifies what are the setbacks, and it also has a default fallback in the ordinance, and that was LR, which doesn't exist in our ordinance anymore, which is now, and if you look at the zoning ordinance, LR is now what we call NC, neighborhood commercial. And but if it doesn't specify it in the PD, it falls back to that ordinance, to the NC standards. But yes, neighborhood commercial. And there are, buffering standards in the PD, which is 15 foot, from along the rock, at that time was called Road A, which is now Pass Drive. The other drives, Haslet Parkway and Harmon Road, the landscape setback was 20 feet. That is true unless there's an area that's being used for loading and unloading. Then you have a 50-foot area that you have to maintain as a green space. And so there are some differences in some of the setbacks because of some of those standards. But this particular land use, the city, if you have a land use that's allowed, the city does not pick and choose what land uses are put there. So if every site on this wanted to be a bank, it could be, even though they probably have some failures. But it could. But if we wanted to have a string of restaurants, it could have a string of restaurants also. And so there are some uses in here that you could have multiple of the same thing, and that's perfectly okay because it's an allowed use in the plan development.
I think the other thing that is worth mentioning that the plan development controls is the physical attributes of those buildings. There were some design criteria in that plan development around the architectural features on those buildings. So I don't want to get into the details of what those were because they're pretty lengthy, but I think that's just one more element of control for continuity in this area.
Yeah, and there will be one more control that you'll have, and that's when we come back, or they come back with a concept plan for a specific site. And at that time, we'll look at details, making sure they have green spaces that are allowed. The site plan that you see before you is almost a worst case scenario because, like Laura mentioned, they want more green space. Well, there will be more green space because you have to have an island that's green within every 10 spaces of parking, and it's not shown here. But it'll be shown on when you do the individual detailed landscape plans and concept plans for the sites.
Well, and aren't these just suggestions that are written in the box? That's not actually what's going on.
That is correct. This is, like I said, it's almost a worst case scenario. So engineering wise, we can calculate the drainage, what kind of water and sewer is going to be necessary to, provide adequate facilities for the site. And so we actually want to show a lot of things bulked up just so that we can make sure that they do a lot. Just like all the runoff, all the parking in there, it's all calculated in so we can handle it. And so if you showed a bunch of green space in there, then that calculation would come down and you'd actually have less runoff.
Okay, let's go ahead and take the additional two comments. So, Mr. Kepeloff? Again, if you would, just state your name and your address, please. And could you turn the microphone on up there and hit the center button?
Mark Kaploff, 1477 Primrose Place, Overhearing, Caraway. Just a quick question. There used to be a line of traffic out on Harmon Road until Haslet Parkway came in, and it helped tremendously. Putting these areas in here, you're still back to a 2-lane road there on Harmon Road, and you're going to have people coming out before the stop sign, which I think is going to turn into a traffic light maybe. But it's just going to be a lot of traffic. I mean, you looking at going 4 lanes on Harmon or just leave it at 2 lanes? I mean, if you have a bunch of restaurants gas stations and other things, you know, how do we figure out how this is going to work without pulling out or coming home at 5 o'clock and sitting in traffic for 20 minutes trying to get to Caraway? So just something to think about before we start building, that's for
Okay.
sure.
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Kaplow. And then, am I correct? Is it Ms. Pino?
Hi, my name is Melanie Pino. I live at 1188 Wild Sun Way in Caraway. My property actually looks straight out onto Pass Drive from the backyard. So I have serious concerns about what actually goes into that space, as some of my neighbors have already addressed. Obviously, the traffic is of major concern, and I don't know if there are plans to widen that. But it's the businesses that will go into that area. First, I'd like to continue to address further to what my neighbor Laura had already mentioned on some of the items that are included in the plan that is proposed by the developers, but what's not in the plan. And I understand, obviously, I may not be aware that certain things may not be allowed for zoning, but those are things I'd like to at least raise for discussion. Obviously, Laura has already mentioned 2 banks, a car wash, and the gas station. We already have 2 gas stations very close to the property, as well as a car wash that's currently in development that will be right across from the 7-Eleven on Timberland Boulevard. Those are not, obviously, a car wash, immediate things that people need on a daily or weekly basis, maybe not even on a monthly basis. I'm curious as to whether or not there has been an impact study as to the amount of Caraway residents who would actually use the daycare facility should one be put in. Many families in that community live in multi-generational homes and work from home as well, and may not need those services for their children, or have children who are already in school full-time during the day, elementary to high school, and also would not use that. It would be a shame if the residents of Caraway are not the primary people using the daycare facility, but it rather becomes a stopping point for other residents of Haslet, Sendero Ranch, or further into Haslet, who use the facility of the daycare right adjacent to Caraway before they hop on the highway or freeway to get to work. I just want to make sure that the space will actually be used by Caraway residents. What I am proposing, though, are things that are not listed and are things that are of daily residential needs to all of Caraway, things such as grocery, pharmacy, and medical. Has anyone considered, and would it be allowed per the plan and zoning, for there to be a grocery store with a pharmacy, such as a Kroger or any other name brand store that can have a grocery with a pharmacy? We don't have those things, and we all drive to Alliance Center, probably the closest, and we spend all of our money over at Alliance Center not funding the Haslet community, which is where we all live, as well as not having access to a quick urgent care medical clinic for those unfortunate emergencies that we all know that we have, or many children do, or elderly. So it really does impact everybody, whether you're a child or an elderly adult. So with that in mind, obviously those are things you need on a daily basis, weekly basis. Gas, banks, car washes, those are already serviced nearby, or not something you need on a daily basis or weekly basis. So just proposing some ideas that residents would need and would be a benefit to all. I think it keeps the tax dollars obviously in Haslet instead of
Okay,
Alliance.
One more minute, okay?
Yes.
Try to wrap it up.
So I just like to point out that we would like to have a voice in what Caraway residents get to have, since we're the ones who live there after the developers are long gone, and we are the ones who have to deal with the traffic that results, and it would certainly be beneficial to have those items that are of essential daily and weekly needs benefiting our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pino. I will respond to one thing, because I think it's important for the residents to understand. The city of Haslet permits uses within the land within the land that exists in the city boundaries. We don't at any point tell somebody what to build on that land. That's an individual landowner or developer's choice. But when they do build, they have to conform to the uses that we've permitted, and hopefully those uses are commensurate to being a residential area or being an industrial area. And we've spent a tremendous amount of time trying to make sure there's compatibility of uses across the entire footprint of the city of Haslet. So I think it's just really important people understand, we don't tell people what to build. And we don't tell them what not to build. It's a developer's choice to do that. Just like we don't tell people to keep cows on their field or sell their field and make houses out of it. We just don't get into that.
Yeah, I'd like to address just a couple items that were brought up. If you can look at the diagram that's on your screen, Harmon Road will be a 4-lane divided thoroughfare, and that's one of the things we spend a lot of time with this developer working on to make sure that adequate turn lanes and with a median and deceleration lanes, et cetera, were included as part of this plan. That's one of the things that you hash out with the preliminary plat, is to make sure those things are included, and they have included them. Additionally, the QT that's going to be on the northwest corner of this intersection is going to be putting in a signal light there at Haslet Parkway and Harmon. And the people in this property are going to need to participate on that. So there will be some effort of helping with the traffic. Just to address a couple other things, all these uses that the young lady mentioned are also uses that are allowed in this planned development, including healthcare, florist, and all different types of uses. It's a quite long list of uses, and there's some things that you really wouldn't want that are going to be on the western edge of this that are currently already approved by a site plan, some more industrial type uses, which were part of the planning in this tract.
Any other questions?
I can't read. What's that right-of-way dedication up there? I can't read that. How many feet of right-of-way dedication? On Harmon, on the west side of Harmon? Can't read.
Mr. Wallach, I think there's a 12-foot dedication in addition to the 120 for Haslet Parkway to facilitate that turn lane into their main entrance.
It's 12 feet?
Yes, sir, 12 in
Okay.
addition to the existing 120. And then there's an 11-foot dedication on Harmon to facilitate that right-hand turn lane
Yeah.
to their main access point off Harmon Road.
Yeah, it's 11 foot.
Yes, sir, and then as we get through the final engineering with the intersection with the Quick Trip folks, that road footprint may shift over a little bit to facilitate some of their movements going north through the intersection. But again, the purpose of this drawing here is to say, okay, give us your worst case, because and that was one of the things that they brought to us over the last 10 months is all we really have for an end user is this daycare. I said, well, we have to evaluate your full impact of your full property, and if you don't have any assumptions, then we'll go through that list of allowed uses contained in the PD zoning, and we'll have to pick the most intense use, because that's what we have to do as the city engineer to ensure you're offsetting your impact. So they came up with this plan here, and again, those are just kind of bookmarks until such time as they have end users for these potential 12 lots on the property. And then as Mr. Morris Schwenke stated, each lot would come in with a detailed site plan to ensure conformity to the zoning standards and access service via water and sewer, et cetera. But they don't currently, at least they didn't as of 2 weeks ago, have somebody looking at this full 24 acres saying we want to do this, this, and this. This is a conceptual site plan that allows us to determine what their impacts are, what needs to be offset. And then as they find users or they sell the property once it's platted, then those end users will come in and propose an actual something, right, based on the table of allowable uses.
I just had two things I wanted to say. One, this is the very, very preliminary, the first draft that they put in. Any development they have to do, they have to put in a landscape plan, a lighting plan. There's a whole list of other requirements they have. to make sure they're not shining lights in the back of your house from the new development, the commercial development. So you don't have to worry about them putting up giant, light poles in the parking lot that'll be shining in your backyard at night. So there are very strict codes on that as well. And like I said, I also live in Caraway. And the one thing I have to always remind myself, this is the very first draft of the first development near our houses. The whole length of Haslet Parkway is, I know that the western part of that field, like we know, is going to be a warehouse, but the whole rest of that area is going to be open for development. And so there's going to be a lot more things that come in there in the future, I think, that are going to be beneficial for us.
Yeah, and all the stuff that he just spoke to comes when we start looking at the final plat. There's a final plat that gets issued, and that is what really drills into the absolute finite details of the attributes of each one of these lots. And that's really all I'm going to say about that. But there was a statement around the subdivision ordinance. The subdivision ordinance it's very broad in how it's applied in the city. It's not just neighborhoods, but it has a lot of the controls and ordinances and development requirements for the local retail and the commercial and all of that. So it's a very broad ordinance, so it's not just for neighborhoods. So I think that was a question maybe you had. I do have a question for city staff, and that is sidewalk on Haslet Parkway. I can see the designation for the sidewalk on Harmon, Paskey, but I don't see anything that shows sidewalk on Haslet Parkway.
Yeah, even though it doesn't show in the concept plan, there will be sidewalks along those thoroughfares when they come in with final plans for those.
Okay, any other questions for city staff? If there's no other questions, is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend to city council that the preliminary plat for Caraway Commercial Addition be approved.
Okay, there's a motion to recommend approval of the preliminary plat to city council. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion been second. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on. We had a report in our packet this evening for the status of development of existing projects. That's an exhibit you can look at on your own free time. And anything that we need to discuss regarding future meetings, like workshop topics or anything that we need to plan for?
Yeah, hopefully at our next meeting, I'm going to have an ordinance revision to speak to some development issues on site plans and what we need to really be looking for and drill down on some of those topics. As well as there's a couple of districts that really don't have any standards with them, and I would like to put some standards forward for those. When somebody comes in for a building, we have something to reflect back, and so there's going to be some of those revisions that I anticipate at your next meeting.
So is one of those changes clarifying what needs to be included and submitted and reviewed as part of the final plat process?
Yes, well, at least the final concept plan and site plan.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, anything else that we need to be aware of at this time?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay, and the time is, what do you have at 7:56? 7:52. We are adjourned. The time is 7:52 p.m. My watch.